for the Cultural Star program. And we're really excited to be getting the grant program out there this year, just with one application round. If you've applied in the past, we typically do 2 rounds, and we're just doing this one this year, so we're glad you're all here to learn more about that. So today we're going to go over kind of the ins and outs of the program, the eligibility, and what types of programs we offer, and the expenses that you might be looking for to have the grant cover, and as well as the application process and timeline for how we make reviews and decisions about the applications. So that's kind of the rundown. I've got a presentation that I'll share. We'll keep everyone muted for the most part, and I'll do a lot of the talking. But you know, you can definitely, this is not a terribly, it's not a huge group. We've got about 25 folks on here. So we could have you either unmute yourself, and you should have a some buttons at the top of your screen on a black bar where you could unmute yourself. You could also raise your hand with the little emoji icon. There'll be a hand raise that you could do there when you click on or put your mouse over the emoji icon. You could do a little hand that kind of jumps up and down like this. And you could also do a chat. So there's a little talking circle with the little, you know, a word bubble. I can't remember what those are called. My kid reads so many graphic novels, so I should know. But the little talking bubble will show up the chat, the conversation, and you could put your questions in there as well. So that's kind of the ins and outs of how Teams works. And thank you all for working with our different technology. Zoom's a little easier, but we use Teams here in the city. And the last thing I'll say is that we are recording it, and we hope to post this video or the previous one so that folks who couldn't make it can view it, or that you could go back and take a look at any parts you wanted to go over again. So with that, I'll briefly introduce myself again, and then also introduce our board members that are on the call with us and staff. So my name's Nora Riemann Schneider. I'm the coordinator of the Cultural Star program. And I've been doing this work for about 5 years now. So it's been great getting to know a lot of the arts projects and organizations in St. Paul, especially as you know, a patron myself and someone who's involved in music. So yeah, it's a great program. And I want to also introduce my coworker Vilma, who works with a lot of the grantees. So Vilma, would you mind saying hi?
Hi, everybody. My name is Vilma, and I work with the Cultural Star program mainly after people are awarded. I'm the one that kind of helps you guide through like the contracting process and also for reimbursement. So I would be the person to reach out to if there was any questions for those who are awarded. And I'm just happy to be here today. I will be taking care of the tech stuff and also maybe like reading the questions if you guys would like to throw them in the chat. So let me know if you guys have anything questions for me.
Thank you, Vilma. And I also see that we've got a couple of board members on, and I'll just say that our Cultural Star board is a 9-member board of folks who work in the arts and culture industry. And they are the ones who read all of your proposals and rate them, and then discuss them to figure out how to make funding recommendations that then go to the mayor and city council for final approval. So first, I will introduce Lindsay Kimball. She is our board chair this year.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay. Thank you so much for being here. I'm glad we're able to have these info sessions to answer questions. Nora and Vilma are amazing. Nancy, too, who's a part of their team, are very helpful. So if you have questions, they're a great resource. And I hope this time is an opportunity to learn more about the grant, answer your questions. We're doing things a little differently this year because of everything going on with the pandemic. So like Nora said, 1 round versus 2. So a couple details that are kind of changing. So I'm glad everyone's here to kind of learn what's going on.
Thanks, Lindsay. And Lindsay has from but works wrong application, where some trouble spots are in the application that folks run into. We'll have some great suggestions today. And then I'd also like to introduce one of our newest board members, also is a past recipient of Cultural Star, Maya Maiden.
Hello, everybody. My name is Maya Maiden. I'm glad to be here and looking forward to being on the board and seeing what all the great artists and organizations are coming up with for the new funding year. Thanks.
Thanks, Maya, and we are very glad you're here and bringing that unique.
Hey, Nora. Sorry to interrupt. Your volume just dipped significantly. So I don't know if there's I don't know. It doesn't look like you're using headphones or anything, but it sounds like it got really quiet really quick.
Well, thanks for the heads up. I'm going to switch to headphones and see if that helps.
Okay. Yeah, we'll let you know if that seems to fix
How are we
it.
doing? Any better?
Oh, that's money. You're good.
Awesome. Okay, thanks, Lindsay. Okay, and I do see that Carol has her hand up, and just want to see if you have any questions to jump in with right away, or if you're just testing hand up feature.
I was just going to say we couldn't hear you. That's all.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. Okay. And that's great. Definitely feel free, folks, to do that, to do the raise hand if you have questions. It's pretty informal today. So that would definitely work. Okay, so I think with that, we will jump into the presentation. And oh yeah, lots of comments. Can't hear you. Wow, you guys are on it. Thank you so much. Of course, if I had seen the chats. Okay, so here we go. We're going to go through some slides here that'll help me keep on track with our, just a second, I'm going to do this one. All right, can folks see the screen, the slide, the cover, the first slide? And I cannot see you right now with the view that I have, so just a heads up there. I haven't quite figured out how to both see the Teams screen and the presentation at the same time. So
yeah, we can't see the presentation quite yet.
Oh, you cannot see it yet?
No.
Okay. Try this a different way. We'll try it one more time. Is that better?
Yay, thank you.
Okay. All right, so we're just going to go into a little background about the program and then get really into the nuts and bolts of guidelines and eligibility and all that good stuff. So it's always important to know where this money comes from because that helps us understand how it can be used. So the Cultural Star program is funded by a half-cent sales tax that's charged within the city of St. Paul that's been around since 1993. And so that actually generates like between, in the last few years, it's been about 18 million a year, which is a really important revenue source for the city to invest back into the city. And we are able to use about 10% of that STAR revenue toward the Cultural Star program. And this is a program that through the state law that guides our sales tax use, that we use to target nonprofit arts and cultural organizations. And it requires, the law around this tax requires that 80% of it is invested in what's known as the cultural district of downtown St. Paul. So this really is kind of about that downtown hub of arts activity. Although we do have funding for citywide as well, just a smaller pool, and we'll get into that while we talk about the program. And then with this funding, we can fund programming, operating, and capital expenses, whereas the rest of the STAR funds are only for capital improvements, which are your bricks and mortar kind of improvements. So we're lucky to be able to use it for programming, which is really kind of the bread and butter of the Cultural STAR program. So this year we're having one application round in 2021. We typically do have 2 application cycles in a year, so that's likely what we're going back to next year. But due to just all things pandemic, it made more sense to offer one round this year. It's also a little bit of a smaller pool of funds than it usually is, so it made more sense to pool it into one funding round. So our program goals are to strengthen the arts and culture sector, to promote economic vitality in St. Paul, and support downtown as a vital cultural center. And so our goals within that are to build and diversify audiences, promote a broad range of cultural offerings, to produce a long-term impact, and to leverage additional financial support. So we're really building that arts and culture sector, and it is about economic vitality. So a lot of times what we fund are activities that get people out and about, that really help give people a reason to visit St. Paul and enjoy St. Paul and all that it has to offer. We have 3 project types that we fund with Cultural STAR. Our first is special projects, and this is really our most common category. Probably like almost all, like 80 to 90% of our projects are special projects. So these are quality arts activities in any discipline. So oftentimes it's performances, festivals, events, things like that. We also fund organizational development, which are activities to strengthen, grow, and develop an organization. So with organizational development, it's going to be a project that's really contained. We do not fund general operations. So it does have to be some kind of project that is going to result in an organization growing, strengthening, getting a new, putting together a new program or a new offering that an organization is doing, enhancing your fundraising capacities. That might be one area. Another might be, this might be a popular category right now, as a lot of organizations are working to kind of figure out what's our next 3-year plan. Now that we've gone through this pandemic, how do we really shift and change our organization to make it through the rest of the pandemic and come out into our new reality, that sort of thing. So that's our organizational development category. And last are capital projects. So these are going to be physical improvements, permanently installed equipment, public art. This is really enhancing those venues and those spaces where the arts take place. So at the beginning, you heard me talk about how 80% of our funds go to the cultural district, and this is a map of the cultural district. It's what most people would think of when they think of downtown St. Paul. So you can really see it's kind of inside the highway ring there, where the majority of office buildings are, and the Ordway and Landmark Center and Rice Park, as well as Lower Town, and some other areas of downtown. It also includes Raspberry Island, which is that island where Wabasha Street goes over, and there's a little stage and amphitheater type space on that island, and it's a city park, as well as Harriet Island, which also has an amphitheater space, as well as just a really, it's a really big park, so there's a lot of space for festivals and things like that. So 80% of our funds are targeted to nonprofits and unincorporated groups that are doing projects in this area. And then the remaining 20% of our funding can go toward businesses that are doing projects within the cultural district. So this is for our for-profits that might be on the call. This is kind of where you would, these organizations would qualify. And then it's also for nonprofits who are doing projects outside the cultural district in the rest of St. Paul. So this year we have about $788,000 for the cultural district. and about $265,000 for Greater St. Paul. And our eligible project dates for this round are going to be August 1st of this year through December 31st of 2022. So typically we have a 1-year time period. This one's a little longer because of our 1 year or our one funding round that we're doing. So it's just, I think, 17 months. And our minimum request is $5,000. That's our minimum award amount. This is a matching grant program, and we require a 1-to-1 match. So in that case, if you're asking for the minimum of $5,000, you would also need to be bringing $5,000 of funding from other sources for a total budget of your project that you're proposing of $10,000. So that's the smallest size project we would fund. The largest for special projects and organizational development, we don't have a specific maximum that we award, but we do state in our guidelines that $50,000 is about the largest grant that we would make. And our average grant size is between $10,000 and $15,000. And the biggest size, the grants that we give the most of is $5,000, but they do range all the way from $5,000 to $40,000 or $50,000. Capital grants have the same rules as far as a 1-to-1 match, but there is not really a maximum stated. So those really vary depending on the scope of the project, of what you're looking to do.
Nora, we have 2 raised hands and a question. Would you rather we wait, or do you want to take them now?
Yeah, let's jump in. That's so we can keep on topic.
All right. So Joe would like to know, would developing evaluation capacity fit under organizational development?
Yes, that's a great example of an organizational development project. Absolutely. So I assume you're talking about how to evaluate the success and the effectiveness of your programs or a program, and that would absolutely fall under organizational development. And we actually do have an example of a pretty good organizational development application on our website that I'll point to later. That's similar in nature to that. So you might be hiring, you know, a consultant or an organization that can help you out with that, that sort of thing. So definitely.
Okay, and then I have Carol and then Mark. They both have questions. They have their hand raised.
All right, Carol. And you'll want to click your little mute button up at the top, your microphone, or it might be at the bottom of your screen, depending on your Teams, how Teams looks to you. I'm not hearing Carol. Do you maybe want to put your question in the chat? Is that something that you can find on your version of Teams?
So if I'm the only Carol, I didn't have a question. I had raised it earlier because we couldn't hear you. That's all.
Oh, okay, great. Vilma can help put your hand down virtually. And the other one was Mark, did you say, Vilma?
Correct.
Okay, Mark, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm wondering, are there, if you verify the 1-to-1 match, and if so, how? And also, can in-kind donations qualify for
Great questions.
1-to-1 match? And then second follow-up question is, if an organization is not a nonprofit themselves, can fiscal sponsorship through a nonprofit qualify?
All right, great questions. Okay, so around the match, and I'll leave it on this screen here. So we, in the application, you'll have a budget to fill out. And what you'll want to do on your budget is show the sources of funding that are going into your project, which would include what you're asking of Cultural Star, as well as any in-kind and other revenue sources. So that might be other grants, sponsorships, It might be earned revenue of some type, like tickets. So it might be individual donations. And really, as far as, knowing that that's feasible, really what we're going to want to know is that feasible? If you haven't secured the grants, do you have reason to believe that you're going to be able to be successful in getting those grants? What are your ticket revenue estimates based on? How have you been at your ticket revenue in the past for past projects you've had, so that you can base it on some past successes and past, something that's pretty reliable for you to make a good estimate and a good guess at. And then as far as the in-kind, we require 70% of the match be cash, so some kind of revenue that's coming in, and 30%, up to 30% of that one-to-one match can be in-kind. So in the example that's on the screen where it's $5,000 of a match, that would mean you could have $1,500 of in-kind. And that can both include the value of something that's being donated, such as the space that you're using or some services that you're getting that are professional, or it can be like total volunteer labor would be $15 an hour. That's how we value volunteer time. So the only time that professional services, which are kind of like volunteering, but really you're getting, like say somebody's going to do your web page for free to promote this event, that might be, you would not have to charge, you would typically either value it at $15 an hour of that person's time, or if they're a business and they can say how much that service would typically cost, then the value of that would be what they say the value is. Like, oh, our website services are $250 to set up this website. Then that would be your in-kind for that service that they're donating to you. So that kind of runs down some of the examples of in-kind. The other question was about the fiscal sponsorship. And so I'm going to go back to this map here. So we do allow unincorporated groups and individual artists to apply using a fiscal sponsor. And for those projects, we actually require that your project is in the cultural district. So the only way unincorporated groups can apply is by having their project in the cultural district. So we can work with potential applicants on venues to check out, or connect you up with the Parks Department about permits, if that applies to you. Because sometimes you're maybe familiar with doing projects elsewhere in the city or in other cities, but in this case, we require that it's in the cultural district. And then the fiscal sponsor has to be based in St. Paul also. So Springboard's really commonly used, Film North. A lot of times smaller nonprofits that we work with have served as fiscal sponsors, like In Progress and Indigenous Roots. Like if you have a relationship with a nonprofit that's based in St. Paul, they might be willing to be your fiscal sponsor. So those are great questions. Any follow-up questions to those details? All right, thanks. So let's see here. Let's see, we went over the amount and the match, the eligible dates. So now we'll get into what to expect if you were awarded funds. We are able to advance 80% of the grant funds after being awarded and getting under contract for special projects and organizational development. And it's always important to note this, because then the remaining 20% comes at the end, after the project has happened. So there is a lag time on that remaining 20% of funds. And this is a time at which we really verify everything in the reporting that you're going to be doing. So this is when we might find out maybe you were not able to achieve the full one-to-one match because your fundraising fell short or something like that. And that would impact the amount of funding we can ultimately provide. at the end of the project. So, you know, if you thought you'd have $5,000 of fundraising, but you only had 4,500, then we can only award 4,500. So it is a pretty big impact, and we do make sure that all the guidelines are met. But usually there's no problems with that, and you know, we're able to give that 20% at the end. With capital projects, we disperse as expenses are incurred. So if you get an invoice from, you know, the guy who's installing your lights or the company that's putting up your new sign, that's when we can pay the grant funds out. And we also account for the match as you go. So say you've been invoiced $1,000, we would give you $500 because we're assuming that your match is covering the other 500. So those are some of the specifics on capital projects. Much less common of a category, but it's pretty important to go over those details for folks that are planning on that category. And last, we've got some picky details about how this all works. The first thing is that St. Paul-based nonprofits that are based outside the cultural district, like for instance, I saw In Progress is on the call. I might have seen a couple others that this applies to, but these groups are eligible to receive 2 Cultural Star Awards in 1 year, and that is also true for 2021. So it's a pretty small subset of applicants, but it's a way, because our pool of funds is so small for outside of the cultural district, this is a way to get a little more support from the Cultural Star program. Otherwise, all other nonprofits and applicants to this program are only eligible to receive 1 Cultural Star grant in a calendar year. So I'm happy to answer questions to see if that specifically applies to you. So you could call me or email me or Vilma or Nancy to find out. Typically also, our funding is only for 3 years in a row if it's a special project or organizational type category, and then we're required to take a year off. So that's just something to be aware of about this program. This kind of has to do with our goal of having a long-term impact. We want to see that groups are sustainable. And however, in 2021, all organizations have been reset because in 2020, we had a special general operating grant that was kind of a COVID relief program. So nobody has 3 consecutive years that they've gotten in this application year. So it's something to know for the future. And last, to get to, I think it was Mark's question, these unincorporated art groups and individual artists, you would use a St. Paul-based fiscal sponsor in order to apply, and your whole project that you're proposing has to take place in the cultural district in order to be eligible.
Nora, Carol has a question. How do you determine if it's based in St. Paul?
With a St. Paul address, typically. So usually it would be what's on your 990. And if your 990 has like your board member's address, or you don't have a rental space that's associated with your organization, then we would take a look at who your service with your program, and how many of your activities are in St. Paul. And if it's the majority of your activities, so meaning over 50%, then we would say that you're a St. Paul-based nonprofit.
And then Joe would like to clarify, just to clarify, we're all being reset. So this would be year 1.
This is year 1, yes, for the consecutive years. That's correct.
No.
And in that 4th year, that year off, we do allow capital projects for those that applies to if you have a physical space. I know a lot of folks don't have a physical space, but it's a nice feature of the program for those that do. Great questions. All right, so now we'll get into the application process. And we have a link to our application. It's an online portal. And the best way to get there is to link through our Cultural Star website or webpage on the stpaul.gov website, just by clicking that Apply Now button that's kind of all over that first page on the website. And that takes you to Zoom Grants, which is the portal that we use. We've been using this portal since 2014, so a lot of you have, you can look back to your past grants, and it's a pretty handy place that it's all in there. So you'll get to Zoom Grants, and you'll either create an account or you'll log into your existing account. We really encourage folks that are coming from organizations that apply regularly, year after year, to just use one account so that you have all that advantage of having everything in one place. And there's a pretty handy help button that I've got a red arrow to that's going to have a lot of frequently asked questions about how to use Zoom Grants, and just if you're running into technical issues, you could check that out. But that said, Vilma and Nancy and I are more than happy to answer questions about, why is this happening and I can't find X, Y, and Z. So, really, we are happy to answer your questions if you reach out to us. And it's a pretty straightforward application. We ask for your organization information. We have about 25, 26 questions that are pretty brief. There's not a lot of characters allowed in any of our questions, including our main narrative question. And really the reason for that is, we have these 9 volunteer board members who review all the applications, and we often get between like 60 and 80 applications. So we just really set up ways for the applicants to just be as concise and clear as possible about the who, what, where, when, and why of your project, and really just boil it down as much as you can, while also, sharing those unique elements that you're trying to put together. As far as some tips on the application process, really the main place to describe your project is going to be the narrative question, which is question number 15. And in the guidelines on the website, we have a lot of prompt questions that could help you kind of think through, how do I write this? How do I respond to this? How do I describe my project? It's great to start with who, what, where, when, and why, and just kind of the nuts and bolts. Like, it's going to be on this day at this place, and we're going to have these things happening, and then get into some of the specific prompts that we have around the impact you hope to have, how you feel that you're able to be successful at what you set out to do, the quality of your program that you want to convey and that you're trying to create, as well as the diversity, the unique features of what you're offering as compared to other groups and activities that are happening in St. Paul. And it's always helpful to use another space like Word to write down and craft your responses, because as much as Zoom Grants kind of saves as you go, it's just a real shame when you're working on something and it hasn't saved for whatever reason, and your internet crashes and everything goes away. So we really do strongly recommend that you're typing your responses to especially these longer narratives in another platform and then moving them over. But on that note, it's really important to get rid of any special characters and any formatting that's kind of automatically in your Word document, because it will give you errors. It's a very blank, there's no formatting, there's no bolding and underlining and bullets and things like that allowed in Zoom Grants, because it imports, for us, it's like we can create reports out of it and stuff, so you can't have those special formatting characters for that to work. So it is, it's really important, because it can cause problems and get you in this spinning save screen that's very annoying and nerve-wracking. To get rid of your formatting in there's a couple ways to do it. You can clear your formatting, you can copy and then paste it into another Word document and remove, like use a button that removes all the formatting. There's a couple ways to do that. So look in your Word, your version of Word, to see how you might do that. You can copy and paste it into a notepad first and then put it into Zoom Grants, because that gets rid of formatting as well. And then due to the really limited character counts, you're going to want to check at the end of your narratives and make sure that nothing got cut off, because your computer might have counted your characters differently than this system does. So, and then when you tab into another question, your response should be auto-saved. So at this point, we're really just going to kind of get into how to craft a good application. I think this is, yeah, the next thing is next steps about the deadline being May 14th and all that. So what I'd like to do is open it up to mostly Lindsay, because she has reviewed these before, but also Maya, having had experience writing them, and she's been successful with her applications. Just what makes a good application, good tips to share, that sort of thing. So Lindsay, would you like to chime in first?
Yeah, I can jump in. I think what's really helpful in reviewing these is to getting a clear understanding of what your project is. So, for example, if it's an event, being really clear about what it is, where and when you want to have it, kind of the audience that you're expecting, and how you're going to promote it. If it's capital, usually those are pretty straightforward because it's really clear what your end goal is. And if for organizational development, sort of like what you want to achieve, and then how you see these funds supporting that. So I would, really lean into describing exactly and clearly, succinctly what your project is and how you see Cultural Star funding supporting that. And then some of the supporting documentation, particularly the budget, is really key. We look at that a lot to really understand sort of where you're at in your funding process, and how you see the Cultural Star funds being used. So that's another thing we look at. A lot of times I'm trying to think, when questions come up, they typically are around us trying to understand how the funds are going to be used and what the project is, particularly if it's something that's a little different. And so there are a lot of different ways you can describe it. There's an option to include a YouTube video. So if you're someone who's more verbally expressive, if you just want to record something on your phone, that's an option as well too. So it doesn't all have to be in written form as well. So those are some of the tips we have, but we read through everything. We look at all the supporting documentation, and we discuss it all together before we make the recommendations to the City Council. And Maya has experience applying too, and this will be her first year reviewing, but she might have some ideas or tips or tricks as someone who's filled it out before.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I would say I really like the Cultural Star grant process because of the application. It's really straightforward. So that's one of the things that I really appreciated as an applicant. I would say just make sure that you include really specifically how this is going to impact the city of St. Paul, or where this is going to be located. I think that's is a key component, but also in doing your budget, to make sure that the income you have matches your expenses is key. And don't ask for more than you can possibly obtain if some of the funding does not come through. Because as Nora said, like when they ask for all the paperwork, etc., they're not gonna give you more than your one, if your one-to-one matches in there. So I would say be on the more conservative side. If necessary, that is probably better than not coming through with it, or just have a backup plan for if all the funds don't come through. What is the backup plan in case that doesn't happen for you? And also the paperwork and documentation. So I would really reach out to Nora and the team to clarify what's necessary in terms of what they're specifically looking for in terms of, okay, do you need invoices? Do you need receipts, et cetera, et cetera? That'll make the process smooth as well. Right, Nora?
It really does. And we are super sympathetic and helpful. Well, we try to be helpful. I hope we're helpful in how that all works, because it is a lot. These are taxpayer dollars, and it's really important for us to be 100% sure that they were spent the way that they were intended to be spent. So we can be a bit of sticklers, and we require more documentation than, like, say, MREC does.
Nora,
So
can I
it's
add
something to
something?
be aware of. Yeah.
I was just going to add one other thing, kind of piggybacking on what Maya said. Thank you for that, both of you. I think the other thing too is in depending upon whether you're in an organization or you're in a group or you're an artist yourself, there are generally like a couple different options of what you can apply for, and or maybe what you might be thinking would fit for funding. And it's really important to emphasize that we're funding arts and culture projects. So if your project feels like it's more maybe educational or more like sports or more something that doesn't quite fit, I mean, I would, as you're thinking through what would be a good fit for funding, really think through like what has the strongest arts and culture component to it. And there's a lot of intersectionality with a lot of those, like with those projects. Like there's definitely a music education component, for example. But be thinking through sort of what has a strong arts and culture project that, as you're thinking through what might want funding.
Yeah, that's a good point, Lindsay. Thanks for saying that. Yeah. Any other thoughts, Maya or Lindsay, or any questions from the participants for Lindsay and Maya? Okay, cool. All right. Well, one thing that might be helpful too is just to take a look at the website, because we've been trying to provide more resources, more information. So, when you go to, oops, this is on the guidelines, but when you get to the website, you're going to see the main page that kind of goes into what Cultural Star is and what our goals are. Our info sessions that we're having. Right here, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but there's the sample applications PDF here. So you can see there's going to be 3 applications there, all in order. So it's just page upon page. But you can see how other successful applicants have done their application, how they've written it. So that can be a good thing to check out. And we're also happy to talk with you about your specific project, and we can send you more applications that might be a good resource for you, something that's similar, or that might have some kind of learning that would be useful to you. And then, of course, our contact information is here. Really, that is what we're here for, is to help with this process and to make these funds accessible. We also, here's our Apply Now button. We've got all our program guidelines, so our capital project, organizational development, special project guidelines. Be sure to look those over and really dig in and see, okay, what's allowed, what's not allowed, how's this going to work, what's the timeline, that sort of thing. And of course, we've got our board members listed here. Those are the folks that are going to be reviewing your application. So that's kind of that. And then just to jump back to the presentation and where we were on that. Here we go. So to get back to next steps, we can't say it enough. The deadline's Friday, May 14th at 4 p.m. We do provide an opportunity to make corrections. So for instance, Maya had mentioned, make sure your budget matches, make sure that your income matches the expenses. If there are mistakes, and this is the most common area that there are mistakes, we will contact you and we will open your application back up to make the corrections that are needed. Because usually we find it's just a really honest mistake, like, oh, I didn't know that that's how it worked, and oh, I thought that I'd put it in right, but I didn't. So we give a chance to make those corrections. And we have a hard deadline for that as well, which will be May 28th. So we make a very concerted effort, if you need to make corrections, to relay that to you, and so that you can jump back on to the Zoom grant system and make the changes. Then I do have that we are doing interviews, but, and sorry, this is breaking news to Maya, but because of the pandemic situation, we are not going to be doing interviews this year. It's just too complicated with the technology, and a lot of those pieces that have to kind of come together. And as valuable as it is, and I know that it can be nerve-wracking, but valuable for the applicants, and the board members find it so important to connect with the applicants. But unfortunately, we cannot see it working very well in pandemic and virtual times. So those will come back in future rounds. This year, what we're going to be doing is sending you questions that the reviewers, the board members, have had about your application, and then you'll have, and this will be about early June. So you would get some questions and you would provide a response to us. So we will get back to you about how that's going to look and what the timeline is going to be for that. And then the board will meet to make their funding recommendations. That'll be about mid to late June, or around June, the week of June 14th. And then the mayor and city council have the final say, and they will be making final approvals at the end of July. So that is the process for the next steps. And then Vilma and others will work with you if you're successful in getting under contract and all that good stuff.
Nora,
So go ahead.
Question. Is there a short version of the actual selection criteria that will be used?
Yes. I mean, I think the selection criteria are based on the goals of the program, and the best place to look for that, I'm just going to jump over back to the guidelines. And yeah, I would say the best place to look for that is in the guidelines. There's a question, there are the question prompts within the guidelines that tell you what we're basing the decisions on. Sorry, I'm just trying to find my web page. Here we go. Sorry about that. So say I'm going to go to special projects guidelines, because that's the type of application I have. And as you scroll through all the ins and outs of the program, you're going to get to our section about the application process. So here we go, application process. And it goes into, we've got the summary tab and the questions, and there's about 25 questions. And scrolling further, we have the instructions for the narrative question, number 15, which is just really simple. It's just to provide a narrative of your proposed project in about 300 words or less than 2,000 characters, addressing the 4 cultural star criteria, which are defined in just one word, these 4 words, as impact, quality, ability, and diversity. And then to further define those, we have sub-questions or prompts for each of those. So for impact, how is your project going to build audiences in St. Paul? Who is your target audience, and what is your expected attendance? How will your project provide increased access to art forms and cultural offerings in St. Paul? What type of long-term impact will your project have on St. Paul? And then on to quality, and ability and diversity. So these are really good ways to think about how to describe your application. and that's, and other things are going to be things like with ability, does your budget make sense? You know, are you able to fundraise the amount that you've set out for yourself? And, you know, did your budget include the types of things that you're going to need to spend money on in order to make it successful, like having artists that you're paying to be part of the production, or marketing, having a marketing budget that's going to get the word out successfully, that sort of thing. So that all these pieces kind of come together. And another question, the question right after the description of your project is about the artists and individuals that are involved in your project. And that's a great place too, to really go into how the people that you're working with are going to make it a success and are going to add to the diversity and the quality of your project and your ability to put this on and make it a successful project. So, and then Maya and Lindsay, this seems like a place you could really weigh in too.
Yeah, I think those 4 buckets are ones we think we look at a lot, and so as long as you're answering those thoroughly, that's helpful for us to get a strong understanding of those. And it's you know, those prompt questions are great because each project is very different, and so it might not apply to every each question and prompt question there might not apply to every single project, or even, you know, in the categories have different ones too. So I think those are things that are good to keep in mind as you're looking at the criteria. I see a question that just popped up.
Yep, I can read it. It says, we have 60 volunteer members who will be paying for parking during the performance. Is this considered as an in-kind donation that supports the project?
That is a good question. Would we consider the parking that they are paying for? Well, for one thing, you could include transportation as one of your budget items, and we could pay for that in the grant, through the grant. So certainly that's something to consider asking for money for. But as far as in-kind, I think we could, but I would probably want to double check that one. I've never actually gotten that question before. So Carol, I think we'll have to follow up on that one, because it's a little more specific than I've had to think about before. But good question. I hope it helps that I'm mentioning that you can have it paid for by the grant, because we do have a line for transportation. Let's see, and then I'm going to do one more content piece. Oops, I switched to the other version of the slides. Can you guys see this? Okay, compliance. Okay, so being, like I said, being publicly funded, we do have some rules and regulations about how the money should be used. And these 2 areas apply to either larger projects that have a big budget or capital projects. So with larger projects that have a total budget, not just what Cultural Star is contributing, but the total budget is for the whole project is over 50,000. We do have goals for the vendor opportunities that you're going to be bidding out, things like renting tents and hiring printers and those jobs where you're like going out on the open market and trying to, not like your artists that are very specific and you need to hire certain people, but this would be for the more of the open market type opportunities. We do have goals that we set that we want you to try to achieve, and try to market and seek out bids from minority-owned, women-owned, and small business enterprises. And we have a database of certified vendors that's available to you. And it includes things like website designers and printers and caterers and all sorts of things. So that's something that might apply to your project, and we will help you in how to try to meet those goals. And then for capital projects, that have total budgets over 25,000, so this is going to be our building projects, we do require certain pay rates for the laborers that are working on the project. Sometimes the vendors that you're using are too specific, like if it's seats in a theater that are getting refinished or something, that's probably too specific of a job that there's not enough competition, or there's not a union level wage. But oftentimes if you're going and looking for bids to build out a studio or something, or getting lighting done, there are going to be opportunities to seek out both the vendor outreach program as well as the payment standards are going to apply for those types of things. So those are just things to be aware of, and to not start your project too quickly before you know what the rules are going to be that we will have on your project. So then it just goes into contact information. So yeah, just get us back together here. Looks like we've got like 1 more minute for any other questions or any other thoughts from Lindsay or Maya or Vilma? Anything I missed?
I just appreciate everyone being here today, and I'm looking forward to reading your applications and all the awesome stuff you'll be creating.
Yeah, ditto. I'm excited.
Yeah, this is great. Thanks so much for taking the time today. And absolutely, really, I welcome your questions and your, bouncing ideas off and things like that. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me.
Thank you, Nora.
Have a great day, everybody.
Have a good one.
Thank you.